How's everybody doing? So if you've been following my channel for a little while, you will know that earlier this year, I got my first PRS. I had that guitar for a few months basically, and then I sold it. It was an S2 Custom 24 in Elephant Gray. So it was an American-made PRS, but it wasn't super expensive. It was the more visually stripped down model. But I got that guitar after much deliberation because I wanted to own the major American brands. So I had my Gibson Les Paul, I had a couple of Strats, although they were Mexican Strats, and then I got the PRS. And I say that I got it after much deliberation because I knew, based on just reading the specs without even having played one, that I would not really like the neck and the way that it felt. But eventually I decided I would just bite the bullet, I would just tough it out, and there is sometimes something to be said for a guitar that makes you work to get the notes out. So I ended up buying the PRS. I got an S2. I wasn't, too much in financially, but it was still not a cheap guitar. And I played that guitar a little bit. I tried to take it to a jam session that I had. I recorded a song with it, and I practiced with it a couple of times. But then I really couldn't bring myself to play it because of what I thought I wouldn't like about it, which was the neck. So after that initial just wanting to play the guitar since I had just gotten it and trying to actively use it and kind of experience the tones and the feel of it and everything, that guitar sat for a couple of months where I didn't touch it at all, and I knew deep down that I was not going to really pick it up and play it. I'm pretty sure it had what you would call pattern regular neck as far as how PRS neck carves go. Don't quote me on that. But basically the width of the fretboard was way too narrow for me, and then combined with the super round fretboard radius, I literally could not play it without pulling the high E completely off the edge of the fretboard. Even if I was picking lightly, like if I was trying to just shred and play something on the top two strings, I would just pull that string off consistently. And for whatever the reason, I'm kind of a heavy-handed player. I play pretty forcefully, and I use a heavy pick, and I have big hands. So after trying to tough it out for a while, I eventually just realized it's not the neck for me, it's not the guitar for me, and I sold it. And also within the span of just the last few months, because I was moving, I realized that I had a lot of guitars that were just sitting there that I wasn't playing, so it was kind of a hassle to move them, and then some of them I did move and then sold since I got here. But these were just a handful more guitars that were just sitting there on the rack that I was never playing, that were pretty nice guitars that really deserved to be used, and I just never would pick them up. And I couldn't foresee myself playing them a lot or playing them more than like a couple of times a year, which is not really enough to justify owning them and trying to keep fresh strings on them. So I sold a bunch of other guitars as well. Firstly, I sold my Chapman ML2, which is the single cutaway. It was from the initial run, so I know they have a lot of newer ones now. And actually that guitar, when I got it a few years ago, it kind of re-inspired me to want to search for better guitars, better gear, better tone. And that guitar alone is responsible for kind of just reinvigorating this kind of passion that I have for gear and writing and practicing and all the stuff that I have had recently. So I had a little bit of sentiment with that guitar, and I didn't play it honestly for a long time before I sold it. So that one sat for a really long time. And the reason why I didn't play that one for a while was strictly because the neck was just too small. So the fretboard was wide enough, it was pretty flat, but it just wasn't a chunky enough neck. It was a pretty fast neck. It just wasn't thick enough for me, so I found myself not playing that guitar, which again, that was a really nice guitar, and it was just sitting there, so I sold it. I sold my black Schecter C1 Stealth with the Floyd Rose. That guitar, since I got it, I pretty much just kept it in drop C sharp, and there's only really a couple of songs that I play in that tuning, but I play a lot more songs in E flat, which is pretty close to that. But with the Floyd, it was just too much of a pain in the ass to change back and forth, so I eventually stopped using that guitar for that. I also had my LTD MH1000 with the Floyd Rose, which was a better Floyd and just a better spec guitar. And so I didn't really need to have two Floyd-equipped guitars to try to maintain. So I got rid of the Schecter. I got rid of my black Mexican Fat Strat. And then more recently, I got rid of 3 more guitars, which would be the LTD with the Floyd. So I kind of just figured, what do I really need to have a Floyd for? I had my fun with it. I learned some tricks with it. I kind of proved to myself that I could use one, that I could take care of one, that it wasn't really like that bad of a thing. And I did enjoy it, but I didn't really see myself using it often enough to justify keeping that. So I got rid of that one. And then I got rid of my Chapman ML1, which was a great guitar. I preferred the feel of that guitar to the ML2, but I didn't prefer the style of it, so I didn't really play it that much. And I also got rid of my Mexican Roadhouse Strat with the vintage noiseless pickups. And again, those were all nice guitars that I liked and that they all kind of had their place, but just not on my rack. And actually, those last three guitars, the LTD, the ML1, and the Roadhouse Strat, I didn't really sell. I traded them in to get a new guitar. Now, obviously, selling so many guitars in the span of just a couple of months really thinned out my collection, and it pretty much left me with just the two guitars that I play a lot, which are my two 2015 Les Pauls with the ceramic pickups, and my ML3 Modern, which I used for drop C, and a couple of my old Agile guitars, which I will pretty much never play again, so I'm just holding on to them because they have nice pickups in them, and eventually I might part them out. My two acoustics, my two basses, and then the guitar that I've been building for like the last year that's kind of at a standstill, so you can't even really count that because it's not really finished yet, so it's not playable. So realistically, if you think about it, that only left me with my two Gibsons and then my Chapman ML3. So then what guitar did I get, you might be wondering? Yep, another Gibson. And to be totally honest, I'm at a point right now where I don't think I could buy another guitar if it wasn't a Gibson. And I'm sure that that will change. I'm not saying that for the rest of my life I can only buy a Gibson, but for the time being, I enjoy them way too much. I've always liked the sound of them since I was a kid. It's kind of like what got me into wanting to play guitar. They have the most comfortable necks for me personally. I can get a lot more speed and dexterity on a Gibson neck than what you would think of as a typical shred neck, even though that might not make sense. My all-time favorite neck that I've ever played is the super wide neck on my 2015 Les Pauls. It might seem counterintuitive, and it's kind of hard to explain why, but having such a wide fretboard and having such a wide neck, for whatever reason, I can shred so much better with it. It's kind of like if a classical guitar neck that's really wide and really spaced out strings was more playable. And that still doesn't even really make sense because the string spacing I think is the same. It just has extra fretboard width. But anyway, for whatever reason, I love that neck, but I've always liked Gibson necks. I've always liked chunkier necks. And even though my new Les Paul is a Studio T, not an HP, it's still a friendly neck. And I've also kind of just been craving that old school, Alnico Les Paul sound lately, so. And then in trading in those three other guitars, I barely had to pay anything for it. I had to just basically pay for the tax and shipping. And it was also right when I just reached my 100,000 view goal for the year, so I felt like I could justify it or I deserved it. But that also could be a little bit of bullshit because I really don't have to justify buying a guitar. If I know why it would be different enough or why it's desirable enough, then it's already justified to me. But it was good timing with the 100,000 view thing, so there you go. I knew that that would be the guitar that I would play as opposed to all the other ones that I had that were just sitting there. So I'm not saying it's the best guitar ever made, but for me, it's my favorite. So whatever guitar you like and whatever guitar makes you want to play, that's probably the best guitar for you. And obviously that's going to be a different guitar for every player. But for me, I can't do any better than a Gibson Les Paul. I just love them. So without further ado, let's hear some tones. As always, thank you guys for watching this video. If you liked it, don't forget to share it and subscribe, and I will see you next time.